The information shared on CNS Unfiltered is for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Always consult your healthcare provider before making any health or lifestyle changes. The views shared are those of guests and do not necessarily reflect those of Innate Clinical Nutrition or its affiliates. This episode includes affiliate links, which help support the show.
Hello and welcome. I am Jena, and this is CNS Unfiltered, a show where clinical nutrition specialists uncover what traditional medicine overlooks. Today, we've got another solo episode where I cover one of my own case studies. Like I've mentioned before here, the work of a CNS is rarely clear-cut. The clients that need our help the most have typically already been down the path of traditional medicine and have not found the answers of the health concerns they have. When a CNS finally steps into the picture, it usually feels like solving a jigsaw puzzle. Maybe our clients come to us with a few pieces connected here and there, but it's up to us to assemble the rest into a complete picture. The complexity of our clients' cases is why it's so important to connect the right symptoms with the right testing. My instinct to start in the gut has a lot to do with this concept. If I look at the inside of a person's gut, I can connect more puzzle pieces. If I know what's happening in the gut, I typically know what further testing is going to give me more answers if that's required. Today's case study is no different. Even though this client's symptoms were not necessarily gut-driven, starting there helped me narrow down where to test and not to guess next. Today, I'll talk about the difference between mold allergy and mold toxicity, how mold impairs the gut, and consequently, the rest of the body. And I'll walk through how I was able to help my client get her energy back, banish her brain fog and lymph swelling, and rejuvenate her immune system so she could get back to enjoying her retirement. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to another solo podcast. I am super excited for this client. I'm super excited every time I get on to talk with you all. But this client specifically, we're going to touch on mold. And so we're going to start really high end, like I like to do, fill you in on all of the gaps. So mold is tricky, right? And there's a lot of different layers to mold and what mold can do inside of the body. But the first thing that I want to clarify is that a lot of people, including practitioners, right? They don't think through the difference of a mold toxicity versus a mold allergy. And so they're going to be very different pathways. And so when I am, coaching different practitioners, they're wondering the mold. And when you do specific tests, some tests are going to be telling us if this client is allergic to mold. It won't necessarily tell us if they have mold. And so that needs to really be thought through. Other tests, like urine tests for the mold, is going to say how much mold was inside of the system or inside being detoxed, right? Because it's coming out of a detox pathway through via urine. How much was there? How much was present? And so this tells me specifically what is in the system, or more specifically, what is being detoxed out of the system, right? Because we're going to have to kind of think through what's actually happening inside of the system, not just what these test numbers are giving us. All right. So this client, she was in her 60s, just retiring, ready to get started with her life. She was just remarried about 16 years prior, moved into her husband's house. And I'm going to tell you why that's important here in a little bit. The life was going great, right? Over several years, she started realizing that she wasn't feeling the best, right? Energy was coming down. So she started to experience a lot of brain fog, a lot of fatigue. And, she just thought that that was just part of the game. She came and she got her hormones checked and she wanted to get that deeper dive. And so that's exactly what we did to no prevail, right? And one of the biggest triggering, most concerned symptoms on the list, when she initially came to me, was that her lips were swelling and they were purple. And you can tell her lymph nodes, like under her arm and her breast and her groin, they were starting to grow. When I went over her initial blood work, her platelets were elevated. Her differential, the eosinophils, were slightly out of range. Her white blood cell count was super suppressed. And I said, okay, we are dealing with something more systemic and deeper rooted here. My first spot is the gut. I know a lot of people do not agree with that, and a lot of people do. But the way I function is your gut is either going to spew toxins into the system or nutrients into the system. It's going to help you detox. It's going to help your immune system. It gives me the understanding of where the body is right now. So even if the problem isn't in the gut, I know of all the contributing factors that have to happen to align the system. So I never feel it's a step sideways. And I bring that up because in this client, when we got our testing back, there were no crazy bacteria. There was nothing crazy going on when it came into, like, I was expecting like an E. coli or a Shanghai, or I was expecting something gnarly, to be honest. But when I was going through it and I got to the end, I had to be honest. And I said, I think there's something bigger going on, because nothing that I see inside of this test will equate to the symptoms that you're having. Now, this test didn't tell me nothing. It still gave me some great insight. What was elevated on this test was the fecal eosinophil protein. And so this is an eosinophil driven protein, and it was raging. It was super high. So this tells me that the immune activation in the gut, so there is something touching the gut, even if my test did not find it, is often still parasitic, toxic load, mold related, maybe Lyme related, but it's not necessarily an IgE allergy. We also saw that calprotectin was raging. And this is, again, a neutrophil-driven inflammation. When we're seeing high calprotectin, we are knowing that there's a active inflammatory signaling happening. The innate immune system is activated, freaking out. There's barrier disruption, and it's not allergenic, right? An allergy alone does not drive calprotectin up. So this is already telling me that it was inflammatory and toxicity, not necessarily an allergy. Let me back up. The reason I keep coming into allergy is because that's where her traditional medicine left off. It was, hey, to that physician, it looked like immune responses, which they are, but they were kind of seeing more of an IgG. They sent her to an allergist. The allergist did test for mold and did test of environmental allergies. She had many environmental allergies, but she had no mold allergies. And so I bring that up because when I get to the end of the blood work and I tell her, I think there's something else going on, tell me about mold. That's my next question. Her response was, well, I did mold allergy testing, and that's not the case. And I said, okay. And now, so something I really want to kind of deep dive now is that there's a very difference between mold allergy response, right? This is going to be more of a histamine response. The hallmark here is like sneezing, itchy eyes, runny nose, hives. This is not the case with this client. When we're seeing purple lips, we're thinking poor oxygen delivery, right? The microcirculatory dysfunction. So I'm thinking we're getting right into the bloodstream here. The vagal tone, we're looking for mast cell mediation, and we're looking for mitochondrial dysfunction. Knowing that the swollen lymph nodes were pretty much in all of the area that your lymph nodes are in, this indicates we're not detoxing. There's definitely an immune processing going on. The body's going through and is trying to clean up all the debris and hold it into the lymph nodes to keep it out of the body's system to help clearance, right? To help the body bring down that toxic load. And this is really causing lymphatic congestion. And again, the body is going to gridlock. And once you gridlock, everything stops moving and we get a buildup in the system. So the lymph nodes swell when the body is clearing toxins, not necessarily just reacting to an allergen. And so that is the approach that I went. I recommended that we get a mold test. So I didn't want to test the toxicity as the allergist did. I wanted to know how much mold was in her system to begin with, right? Where are we looking? And when I had given her that initial question of, okay, I'm looking at this test and I see we have something big going on, but there's nothing really in this test that makes sense, right? The math don't math to me. I read enough of the tests that the math don't math. And she mentioned moving in with her husband about 16 years ago, and he loves plants. Every inch of their house is covered with plants, and plants that he has had for years and years and years and years and years. And she goes, can that do it? She goes, I literally see mushrooms growing out of these plants. I'm like, okay, ding, ding, ding. We have mold spores literally growing on top of an environment conducive for mold toxicity. There was one spot in her house, spare bedroom, that she removed all of the plants and started sleeping in that bedroom with a air purification system. And she was finally able to get to sleep. Sleep is huge. When we're talking detox, we're talking immune system. Most of the time, sleep is compromised because the body's in a fight or flight, and that naturally compromises digestion and sleep because the body's like, you know what? We're under attack. We better sleep with one eye open tonight to make sure we don't die. When in reality, we have to sleep because the attack is coming from inside, and in this case, inside outside, but it's not something she was able to fight through the night. So that was one of the first changes that we had to make. We had to give a clear spot of not being bombarded with extra mold. The mold test, the urinalysis of the mold came back that she had many types of mold, and specifically the kind that grew around trees, that could have come from the outside in. So now the maths. Now we understand it. The thing with mold is that you can't out eat it. You can't out supplement it, right? It is as tricky, if not trickier than yeast. They can even cross certain times, certain things. So you have to know that they're very opportunistic. You become their host. They're going to integrate right into your system. And if you do not remove the client, or remove yourself away from the mold, and you open up detox pathways and you start turning on the immune system to fight, this could be extremely devastating inside the body. This can release a toxic load that, again, that Herx reaction that could be super detrimental to the system. It can shift the immune system, shift the microbes. And usually, if the body is fighting, right, this is going to take a lot of energy away from the system, from the person. They're not going to feel good because their body's toxic load is too much. And if the body is in a gridlock, like we see with this client with all of her lymph nodes, and we start pushing pathways and trying to pull detox, like it's not going to work. It's going to hurt. So with that being said, removing the room, able to sleep, getting in the air purifiers, I recommended that she do a lymphatic massage. We were doing binders, we were doing gut repairs because the mucosa was really low. I was putting in SBI Protect to help with that, immune modulating, and I just started to clean up the system. Number one was bring down the toxic load. I know a huge thing, like when you sit through mold, CEs, or whatever, glutathione comes up a lot, and it's a master antioxidant for the liver, and it is a wonderful detoxer. But you want to go really low and you want to go really slow, if at all. I know we're taught detox, number one, yes, but you have to understand what layer of detox you have to open. And so if someone is constipated, that's your number one. You have to. Even if it's constipation, diarrhea, or they're letting a little bit out every day, they may not consider that constipation. That needs to be moving. And a lot of times I feel like there's swelling in the colon for that reabsorption because of the inflammatory state of the body. So even understanding the gut at that point and being able to open up, sometimes calcium deglucarate, is where you're going to want to start. That alone, within 2 months of holding that, her lips were no longer purple. The lymphatic massage she loved and started doing weekly, and that just really helped. We started detoxing out of the skin, right? So Epsom salt baths, not necessarily a hot sauna, but the infrared saunas are really beneficial. And the goal is, because they're already in the lymph nodes, they're already close to the surface. The body has it already outside of the gut and encapsulated. We want to align with the easiest and safest detox progression from that point. And so castor oil was another one that we were able to put over the lymph nodes and just to start gently modulating that inflammation and gently detoxing. It was a lot of conversation between her and her husband, and they end up compromising of not getting rid of the plants, but to change out the soil in majority of them, especially the ones that were growing mold. And as she explained it to me, they're not normal plants. Some of them are like trees themselves inside. So this was a big conversation and a big ask. And it took several months. So over these several months, working, checking in every month, energy was better. She was able to retire and celebrate. She was able to go and have a glass of wine, with her husband when they dined out. Where before that was an issue, right? Too much toxic load, too much histamine. A lot of the food reactions that she was actually having when she came, that she thought was sensitivities and allergic reactions, which did not show up on the testing, was really because of how toxic the system was playing off the histamine responses. Even though it wasn't an allergic reaction, there was a buildup of toxicity in the system. And so a lot of times I find that a kill off is not necessary for mold. A lot of time is shifting the environment, shifting the system, binding, opening up detox, but really removing and getting the body unlocked, right? Getting that circulation going again. And that just alleviated the fatigue and the brain fog and the sensitivities and of course, the swelling lips, the lymph nodes. With such a severe case, I bring all this up because even though it was severe, we really didn't have to do anything crazy, right? So there's a lot of times that in my gut restores, I break down in different phases. We got to dance with it. Sometimes we're not done in 3 months. And a lot of times mold will impair the gut. And we were very grateful that the gut was signaling. I understood what it was telling me, because right, it's the first line of defense. We breathe it in, it goes into our gut, and then our gut tries to safeguard. And so it was great for understanding. And normally this is where the body allows opportunistics, right? But she didn't have anything crazy opportunistic inside. So meaning she didn't encounter it, which was definitely 2 to 3 steps ahead of the game, making this a pretty easy transition. Client is happy, client is healthy. Where traditional medicine left off was allergy testing. What I did to uncover what was really going on was doing a stool test and understanding how to read it. And even though there was only 2 markers off, I understood where to go next from that, what that meant, and pairing it with the extensive blood work that we did. I was able to understand there was something bigger and where to look next. The testing, we probably didn't even have to really do the mold test, but it was important for us to see the levels. It can tell me how long we need to go through the detox, right? How severe is the case? How close proximity are we sleeping, right? Within it, or are we living in it? Are we removed from it, right? There's just a lot that I can tell. It'll tell you the types. So I think it goes through 5 or 7 different types of yeast. So then I can say, okay, it's coming from environmental, or it's coming from your air ducts, or it's coming from your food, right? Kind of give me a root cause so I understand how to shift the lifestyle and the eating piece for the client. But that really didn't change the detox modalities that I recommended or the process that I used. The myth I would like to debunk is that all mold issues are because someone is allergic to mold. And I say that just because working with many mold clients has come up a lot, which is why I even started this show, explaining the difference and explaining the testing, and to really understand what you're testing for. What an IgG means, what an IgE means, what an IgA means, what eosinophils are leading to, or calprotectin. Once you kind of understand the cascade within these mechanisms and what starts them or what keeps them, you really get to narrow it down and get to make the steps forward. And so the myth I would like to debunk is that you have to have an allergy to have crazy symptoms. Toxicity is enough. Toxicity gives her protocol, right? Gives the immune activation, the eosinophils, the calprotectin, the platelets, the swollen lymph nodes, the circulation impairment, fatigue, brain fog. And then she responded to detoxing lymph flow. When this is an allergic reaction, an IgE mediated, we're looking for high histamines and hives, swelling of the throat, swelling of the tongue, some sneezing, some itching, some watery eyes. We're able to look down the symptoms. So even without testing, I can ask these questions, and we can still come to an understanding of what might be going on. Fortunately, she wanted the testing. I had the testing, and we just ran it for our understanding. But I just wanted to share this case. It was such a feel-good case, to have her come from physicians in a very trying state, a very severe state. To me, purple lips and swollen lymph nodes all over the body is pretty severe. And then to have a total dramatic change from that within 4 to 6 months. If you are living with mold or are a practitioner, saying, ooh, okay, there's layers to molding inside the body that we have to think through, and you want to know more, have questions, please reach out to us. If you're getting value from these conversations here on the show, I'd love your input as I continue to build this podcast. Head to the link in the show notes and fill out a quick listener survey. It's going to help me shape future episodes, case breakdowns, and who I bring on the show. I'm also using it to invite a small group into upcoming practitioner resources and case-based discussions. So if that's something you're interested in, make sure you add your name there. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what's coming next. Thanks to our listeners for tuning in today for this episode of CNS Unfiltered. If you're working on those CNS credentials, remember that connecting the symptoms to the right test is one of the most crucial components of our job. My beginning strategy is to lean into the gut first and see what I find there. However you decide to approach your cases, you need to be able to identify the right tests that will help you piece together the puzzle. Check back next week for a regular episode and stay tuned for more solo episodes with my own clients in the future. Once again, I'm Jena Salisbury, and remember to listen to your gut.